rights is regarded as the cornerstone of the South African democratic country. But then the question remains, is the Bill of Rights taken into account? I welcome you all. I'm your host, Sisiphosethu, to our talk show, The Constitution Today. Today we're discussing a very popular topic, HIV. HIV being an infection that has 3 stages. We have a first stage, which is the acute stage, second stage, chronic stage, and the last stage being the AIDS stage. Acute stage is the stage whereby a person gets symptoms after getting an infection from 2 to 4 weeks. And then chronic stage is the stage where a person uses medication, ARVs, and then the person has no symptoms to show that he or she has HIV. And then we have AIDS stage, being the last stage of HIV, whereby the person who didn't take medication gets to be infected by severe diseases such as cancer and TB. Even though we have such information, people living with HIV and AIDS get their rights to be violated. Last week in court, we had a case of Mr. Wolfmister, who is in stage 2 and got his right violated by not getting employed because of his HIV status. But you know, guys, I don't get to discuss these things alone, but we have our guest today, Mr. Ralarala, a civil rights attorney, Mrs. Benedicte, an entrepreneur, Mrs. Emihle, a person living with HIV and AIDS, and then we have Mr. Bathabile, an activist in an organization called Ubuntu. They will be helping us to discuss the case of Mr. Wolfmister, if he was unfairly treated or was his rights being violated. So I welcome you all again on our show. Yes. So because we're talking about HIV being a crucial disease that most people don't understand, we're going to start with you, Mrs. Mafuya. As a person living with HIV and AIDS, what does HIV positive status really mean to you?
HIV positive status doesn't mean that much to me because it doesn't affect my capabilities. I can perform any normal duties like a normal person can, but there are people who still think that people who have HIV are incapable and are not worthy to receiving jobs. But like, for instance, in my case, I don't think I would be employed to be a chef, especially at a restaurant. But they would employ me to be a waitress instead because I will be touching the food.
Oh, well, I also think if maybe you employed at a specific job, maybe they might think that you'll be late for work or absent a lot because you obviously have to take your ARVs and all that.
Now, that's the thing when it comes to people who have HIV being treated. Just because we have HIV doesn't mean that we will be late. We will take our medication at home before coming to work. So we have things under control for the job.
Coming to your statement saying that a lot of people think that because you are HIV positive, you don't deserve to get employed. Have you ever experienced such negativity at your workplace?
I have received such negativity. That time I didn't know much about my rights. I remember this time I applied for work to look after children at a creche. So I didn't get the job because of my status. They thought I would infect the children since I will be working with their food, preparing for them, and also the parents of the children didn't trust me that I will be safe to look after the children. So I didn't get the job.
Wow, that's so cruel. So Mrs. Benedicte, from Mrs. Mafuya's case of her not getting employed because of her HIV positive status, do you guys practice at your workplace? Do you guys practice the custom of knowing your employee statuses?
I work at the HR department where we have over 500 employees, and obviously with 500 employees, we do not practice the fact that we have to know each employee's status. We do know them personally, but not with HIV and the medications and stuff. But if you have like 20 employees, I would actually think that people would actually want to know more about the employees. But in our company, no, we do not practice that.
Okay, so that means you actually just, it's up to your employees.
Yes,
to
it's
tell
up
you.
up to my employees.
Okay.
If they come up to me and they tell me about their HIV status, yes, but if they do not, then that's okay with me.
Okay. So Mr. Bathabile, since we've spoke about Mrs. Mafuya and then we've heard the side of Mrs. Benedicte, how does your organization assist people with HIV in general?
generally. Okay, thank you, ma'am, for your question. In our organization of Ibudu, we assist people that has HIV/AIDS by teaching them right, breaking down constitutional law so that they can know which law that can protect them. Sometimes we create groups for them so that they can gain experience and gain some ideas. Yeah, guys.
Okay. So you're saying that you create groups so that you can help those people to know more about their rights. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So Mrs. Emihle, since you are a victim of HIV and AIDS, wouldn't you like to ask Mr. Bathabile some questions about their organization?
So, Mr. Bathabile, in your organization, how would you protect myself and Mr. Hofmeister in this case of our rights being violated, of being denied the job, of getting the job? Because
Okay, Mrs. Mafuya, in our organization, as I said, basically that we teach you about rights. When we teach you about rights, we try to lift your self-esteem and confidence so that you can feel stronger and you can fight for your rights. That's
so
how
you
we
would
do it.
actually help me to fight for my rights.
Fight for your rights.
In which way? How?
Which way? The way that you can do it is just first you can try to make you feel confident and lift your self-esteem more and more so that you can have the power and the desire to do it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, because we're talking about the case of Mr. Hofmeister, coming back to the case of Mr. Hofmeister, do you think that Mr. Hofmeister was treated unfairly?
Yes.
How so?
When it comes down to Employment Equity Act, I would say he was treated unfairly. Because in the Constitution it states that with regards to Employment Equity Act, that everybody deserves a fair chance to employment. So when Mr. Hofmeister wasn't given the fair chance to employment at South African Airways, he was then unfairly treated. So, yeah.
So I would say equality is involved. When it comes to equality, Mr. Hofmeister has been discriminated directly. The Constitution, whereas the Constitution states that everyone deserves equal protection, no one should be discriminated.
Yes.
The fact that he was denied the job emphasized on the fact that his right was violated. So yeah.
Also denied the job because of his status.
Yes.
Okay, guys. As you know that in human dignity is very important right that the person must have. Due to the law, human rights states that everyone deserves to be respected and valued and protected equally. Mr. Hofmeister was not respected. He was disrespected. He was not valued because they assumed the South African Airways assumed that Mr. Hofmeister has a stage 3, which is AIDS, but he is still on stage 2, which is chronic. He can able to work.
Yes.
I don't understand why they didn't employ him or why they didn't get the job.
It's unfair treatment, yeah.
And your question makes sense because he was in stage 2. He was taking his medication, and then there are no symptoms that shows that the person is sick. He won't be able to perform like his duties. So guys, we talked about HIV, the stages of HIV. We had our guests talking about how they get to help people, and then activists told us what the organization Ubuntu does to help people with HIV and AIDS. So now we're going to take a break. So what I need you guys to do is to go on our Facebook page, like the page. It's #Constitution Today. Like the page, and then keep on sending your comments. After the break, we'll be taking your questions. So yeah. Welcome back, guys. Before the break, we spoke about HIV and how the rights were violated of Mr. Hofmeister. Now we're back still with our guests, the civil rights attorney, the entrepreneur, an activist of the organization. So before the break, I promised that I'm going to take your questions from our Facebook page, the Constitution Today. So we have our first question from Zanokolo, who is asking, what are the limitations to the rights you have listed?
first one would be
Yes.
Mr. Hofmeester was discriminated directly. The legislation didn't act upon that matter and didn't prevent that unfair discrimination. So therefore it leads us to that limitation is imposed by another party. Now when I say imposed, I mean that it's forced on someone. So therefore it's forced on someone by another party. So yeah, that's it.
So then when it goes down to Employment Equity Act, I would go back to what Mr. Ralarala said, that the only way your rights can be limited is if somebody else imposes it onto you. So when South African Airways did not employ Mr. Hofmeester because of his HIV status, they then limited his right. So they limited his right to fair employment but not employing him, even though his qualifications or he met the job requirements that South African Airways were looking for.
Based on human dignity, I've already explained it firstly that human dignity is all about value and respect. Mr. Hofmeester was not respected well because the South African Airways think that Mr. Hofmeester didn't have the capabilities to work. So that's how the limitation of human dignity works.
I just hope that Zamukolo is answered. We have another question from Miranda Sotobe, who is asking Mr. Ralarala directly, who mentioned the Constitution. Miranda is asking Mr. Ralarala, how was the Constitution founded?
Yeah, the Constitution. That is the supreme law that was established in 1994. It basically states the rights and duties for every South African citizen, right? So it was, as I said, it was established in 1994, promoted in 1994. However, it only came to effect in 1997, the 4th of February, right? So it basically defines the national flag, the country's flag, sorry, the national anthem, and goes to specifying the different types of languages that we have. So all in all, we as South Africa, we're seen as a democratic country, right? That is a unit. So that is based on principles of human rights. If any decision has to do with our scenario, which is Mr. Hofmeester, it will start off with magistrate courts and then go up to it goes up to the higher court of South Africa and goes to the Supreme Court of Appeal and then goes to Constitution Court. So they will take the major decision based on the scenario.
Mrs. Benedicte, what do you think the South African Airways should have done differently in the case of Mr. Hofmeester?
One of the things I think they should have done differently when it comes to Mr. Hofmeester's case is just comply with the Employment Equity Act. When you comply with the Employment Equity Act, it clearly just states that every single person should be given a fair chance to employment. They should have given Mr. Hofmeester a chance to be employed, and if Mr. Hofmeester maybe is late for work, doesn't give them reasons, and then only take actions against him. Give him a fair chance, see how it goes, and then only make a decision, okay, no, I don't want this guy in my company.
Okay, when it comes to you, Mr. Ralarala, what is your argument on the case of Mr. Hofmeester?
I feel that Mr. Hofmeester should have got the job, since the Constitution states that everyone must be treated equally, everyone deserves equal protection. And the fact that the national legislation, which is Employment Equity Act, didn't act upon that is definitely wrong. So yeah, that's my agreement. I totally agree with Mr. Hofmeester that he should have got the job.
Okay, and everything, because we spoke about HIV and the case of Mr. Hofmeester, we tried by all means to solve the case. So it's up to the Supreme Court to decide, and then we played our part. So until next week, same time, same place, we love you.